He looked me in the eye and said, "You are no daughter of mine." Even now, years later, I can still hear the echo of those words, sharp, cold, final. It happened under the chandeliers of a ballroom filled with people who used to smile at me. My father's voice didn't shake. Mine did. I remember my hands trembling, not from fear, but from disbelief. How do you stop being someone's daughter in one breath? Guests turned away, pretending not to see. My mother froze like a statue, eyes pleading with me not to answer back. My brother smirked, hiding satisfaction behind his champagne glass. I stood there exposed, humiliated, realizing that in my family, love was measured in reputation, not blood. That night, I learned something brutal. Respect in my house wasn't earned through truth, but through silence. And I had been silent my whole life. But when he denied me, he set something free inside me, something he could never control again. That was the night I stopped being his daughter and started becoming his biggest secret. Growing up in the Marlowe family was like living inside a framed photograph. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Our house stood on a hill overlooking the city, its white pillars gleaming like pride itself. People admired us, the respectable Marlowes, they'd say, but behind those walls, respect came at a price. My father, Charles Marlowe, was the kind of man people stood straighter around. Every word he spoke carried weight, every glance decided who mattered and who didn't. And in his world, I was always the shadow, quiet, careful, and easily overlooked. My brother Jason was the golden one. The chosen heir. He could break a promise, waste money, even insult a guest, and my father would still pat his shoulder and say, "That's my boy." At family dinners, the pattern never changed. Jason talked about business. Grace, his fiancée, charmed everyone with her sweet, practiced smile, and I just tried to exist. I'd serve the wine, smile politely, and listen to stories that didn't include me. "Elena, maybe you should help your mother in the kitchen," my father would say whenever I tried to join their conversation. "Of course, Dad," I'd answer, swallowing the small ache that came every time. My mother, Marion, wasn't unkind, just tired. Years of keeping peace had softened her into silence. She'd glance at me sometimes, as if to say, "I see you, but I can't help you." I understood. In our house, love wasn't spoken, it was negotiated. Only Aunt Lillian, my father's sister, treated me like I mattered. She'd visit every few weeks, bringing stories from her travels and calling me her mirror soul. Once, when my father left the room, she leaned close and whispered, "Charles only loves mirrors that reflect him. You, my dear, remind him of everything he wants to forget." I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but her eyes, sad and sharp, stayed with me. The family's latest obsession was Jason's engagement. My father was planning a grand celebration, something to solidify the Marlowe legacy. He gave Jason the company's top position and Grace the spotlight. Me, I was asked to handle the decorations. "You're good with details," he'd said, as if I were a helpful assistant, not his daughter. I tried to believe that maybe this time things would change, that my effort would finally earn a smile, a word of approval, a moment of belonging. But the closer the event came, the more invisible I felt. Grace started calling me her helper, correcting my choices with a polite laugh that carried quiet cruelty. One evening, while finalizing the guest list, I saw my father's hand linger on a paper too long. His expression darkened, guilt, maybe, or fear. When he noticed me watching, he quickly folded the document and said, "Some things are better left to the men in the family, Elena." His tone was calm, but something in his eyes, that flicker of panic, told me there was more beneath our perfect surface. That night, as I passed the family portrait in the hallway, I noticed it for the first time. My father, my mother, Jason, and Grace all smiling. But me. My image was slightly blurred, as if the glass itself refused to remember I belonged there. And that's when I began to wonder, what was my father so desperate to keep hidden? The morning after Jason's engagement was announced, the house buzzed like a movie set. Florists, planners, and photographers walked through the halls as if the Marlowes were royalty. My father stood in the center of it all, giving orders, his voice sharp and commanding. I stood at the edge, invisible, holding a clipboard that no one cared about. "Elena, the silver theme you suggested feels too dull. Grace said lightly, waving her manicured hand. We want something that looks more expensive. I forced a smile. Of course. I'll change it. She turned to my father and giggled. She's trying, Mr. Marlowe. She just doesn't understand what the family name stands for. My father chuckled and didn't correct her. Every word felt like a bruise. I had grown up believing that if I worked harder, stayed quieter, followed the rules, maybe I'd earn my place. But in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't part of their story. I was just a footnote in the Marlowe legacy. At dinner that night, Jason raised a toast. To my fiancé, to my father, and to the future of our family company. Everyone clapped. My glass stayed still. My father turned toward me, his expression half smile, half warning. Elena, don't look so serious. You'll make the pictures gloomy. I laughed softly, but my chest burned. Later, I overheard them in the study, my father, Jason, and Grace. Their voices were low, serious. We need to transfer the shares before the auditors review them, Jason said. I'll handle it, my father replied. No one needs to know. Especially her, Grace added, her voice sharp. She still thinks she's part of this family business. Laughter followed. I froze in the hallway, my pulse pounding. What were they hiding? Why was I being excluded from something that involved my name, my family's company? I wanted to confront them right then, but I didn't. I went to my room, shut the door, and cried in silence. The next morning, I tried to talk to my father. He was sitting at the dining table, reading the newspaper as if nothing could touch him. Dad, I overheard something last night. About company shares, about me. He didn't even lower the paper. You misunderstand things, Elena. Focus on the engagement arrangements. But Enough. His voice cracked like thunder. Don't embarrass this family with your imaginations. My mother appeared in the doorway, eyes pleading with me to stop. Please, Elena. Not now. Not before the event. I nodded, swallowing the hurt. That was always the rule, not now, not here, not ever. But humiliation doesn't stay quiet forever. A few days later, Grace found me fixing the floral arrangements and leaned close, her perfume sweet and suffocating. You know, your father told me once you used to cry because Jason got more attention. Isn't that childish? I didn't answer. She smiled wider. Don't worry, Elena. Some people are meant to shine, others are meant to clap for them. That was it. The last drop of dignity snapped inside me. I stormed into my father's office that evening, tears burning in my eyes. Tell me the truth. What are you hiding from me? He looked up from his desk, calm and cold. You want the truth. You're not part of this legacy because you can't handle it. You're too emotional, too weak. My breath caught. Weak. Or just not corrupt like the rest of you. His hand slammed the desk. Watch your tone, Elena. You are one step away from disgracing this family. And then he said the words that ended whatever love I had left for him. You were a mistake, Elena. I gave you my name out of pity, don't make me regret it. The room fell silent. My mother's voice trembled from behind the door. Charles, please. But I was already gone, leaving behind the daughter who still hoped for his approval. As I walked down the hall, Aunt Lillian stepped out of the shadows. Her eyes glistened. You heard him, didn't you? I nodded, unable to speak. She touched my shoulder and whispered, then it's time you learned what is really hiding. And in that single moment, the real war in the Marlowe family began. After that night in my father's office, something inside me changed. I didn't cry anymore, I watched. Every smile, every whisper, every side glance became a clue in the quiet investigation I was running inside my own home. The more I observed, the more I saw how easily cruelty had become normal here. Jason's engagement preparations continued like nothing had happened. My father walked around proud, chest lifted, as if our family name had never been dirted by lies. My mother stayed silent, her eyes swollen from crying behind closed doors. Aunt Lillian watched everything with a knowing calm, the kind that comes from years of witnessing the same pain repeat itself. Grace, meanwhile, had turned humiliation into a sport. At the pre-engagement brunch, surrounded by guests and cameras, she called out across the garden, "Elena, dear. Did you bring the dessert samples? We need someone to taste before the real guests arrive." Laughter followed. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, pitying, mocking, entertained. I smiled tightly, picked up the tray, and replied, "Of course. I wouldn't want to ruin your perfect day." Grace leaned closer as I passed by. "You already ruin most days just by being here." Every word was poison, and I swallowed all of it. Because in this family, fighting back was treated as disrespect. Later that evening, I overheard my father speaking with reporters who had come to cover the Marlowe family success story. "Both my children are doing well," he said. "Jason, of course, is my successor. Elena, she's focusing on smaller things." He didn't even look at me. Just spoke over me, as though I was an afterthought. A journalist smiled politely and asked, "And will Elena play any part in the company's future?" My father chuckled. "She plays her part by being supportive. Every family needs one quiet pillar." Quiet pillar. That's what I had become, decoration. That night, Aunt Lillian found me sitting alone on the back porch, staring at the garden lights flickering in the distance. "He's rewriting your place in this family," she said softly. I didn't look up. "He already has." She sighed. "Then you need to start writing your own chapter. Before they erase you completely." Her words settled deep inside me, heavy, haunting. As the engagement week went on, the tension in the house thickened. My father became more controlling, Jason more arrogant, Grace more cruel. Even the staff avoided looking me in the eyes. The only person who treated me kindly was Daniel, my childhood friend who worked in the finance department of the company. One afternoon he pulled me aside. "Elena, something's off with the company accounts. A lot of money's being moved under Jason's name, but it's signed off by your father." I felt a chill run through me. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet. But if this comes out, it won't just ruin them, it'll ruin you too." That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was silent except for the ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. I walked past my father's study and saw a faint light under the door. Curiosity got the better of me. I leaned close and heard Grace's voice. "She's starting to ask questions, Charles. You need to shut her down before she ruins everything." My father's voice was low, dangerous. "Don't worry. She won't dare cross me. She never has." They both laughed. That sound, their laughter, broke something inside me that had held on too long. The next morning, my father announced that Jason and Grace would take over the company's upcoming anniversary event, the same event I had been planning for months. When I protested, he simply said, "Elena, you're better suited for behind-the-scenes work. Don't take it personally." But I did. I took every word personally. Because I finally saw the truth, my family wasn't just ignoring me, they were erasing me. During the next family dinner, the tension boiled over. Grace made a toast about the importance of loyalty and knowing one's place. Her eyes met mine across the table, full of smug delight. I set my glass down. "Some people mistake silence for weakness," I said, my voice calm but sharp. Jason laughed. "Is that your speech for the night, Elena? Short but meaningless." My father's glare silenced me before I could reply. For the rest of the meal, I stayed quiet, my heart thundering in my chest. The humiliation wasn't new, but this time, I didn't shrink from it. I studied their faces, their lies, their fear of truth. Because now I had one question echoing in my head: what were they hiding that made them so afraid of me speaking? And as I stood to clear the table, I caught a glimpse of my father's study door slightly open again, the same folder he had hidden before, sitting under the lamplight. That night, I decided whatever was in that folder, I was going to find it. Even if it destroyed everything. The night of Jason and Grace's engagement was supposed to be a celebration, but for me, it became the graveyard of whatever was left of my dignity. The ballroom shimmered with gold and crystal. Laughter filled every corner. Guests in elegant suits and glittering gowns toasted to the future of the Marlowe name. My father stood at the center, the proud patriarch, shaking hands and accepting compliments like trophies. Jason and Grace looked like a picture-perfect couple, all charm and arrogance. And me. I was there because my mother insisted, whispering, "Just smile, Elena. Tonight isn't the night for fights." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to survive one evening without being reminded that I didn't belong. But even as I stood quietly by the champagne table, I could feel eyes on me, the subtle judgment, the whispers that followed my name like shadows. Then it happened. My father took the microphone for his speech. His voice boomed across the hall, full of pride and confidence. "Tonight, we celebrate not only Jason and Grace," he said, "but the continuation of our family legacy. I built this company with my own hands, and now, it's time to pass that legacy to the next generation." He paused dramatically, looking at Jason with that rare, glowing pride I had begged for all my life. "From this day forward," he continued, "Jason Marlowe will hold full authority as the heir of Marlowe Industries." Applause erupted. I froze. My chest went tight. I had been working in that company for 5 years, running entire projects behind the scenes, never once asking for credit. I wasn't expecting an inheritance, but I thought I mattered. Then came the words that shattered everything. "As for my daughter," he added with a smile that sliced straight through me, "Elena has chosen a quieter life. She'll always be family, of course, but not involved in the business. It's for her own peace of mind." Laughter rippled through the room, polite, soft, devastating. I felt my legs tremble. My hands went cold. Grace's smirk burned into me from across the stage. "Jason didn't even look my way," I whispered, barely breathing. "He just erased me." When the applause died, I stepped forward. My mother's hand shot out, trembling. "Elena, don't." But I did. I walked up to that stage, my heels clicking like gunshots. "Dad," I said into the microphone, my voice shaking, "you forgot to mention the part where I worked for you, the part where I gave up my own career to help this company grow." The hall went silent. My father's expression froze, then hardened. "Elena, not now." "No," I said, louder this time. "Now is the only time anyone's listening." Gasps echoed. Grace whispered something into Jason's ear and smirked. My father's jaw tightened. "Elena, stop embarrassing yourself. You've had issues lately. Emotional ones. We've tried to protect you." My heart dropped. "Emotional issues?" My voice cracked. "Is that what you're telling people now, that I'm unstable?" A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Reporters raised their cameras. I felt my mother's eyes begging me to stop, but the pain was louder than her silence. "You taught me to stay quiet for the sake of family," I said, my throat trembling. "But tonight, you've made it clear I was never part of it." My father leaned in, voice low but venomous. "You are no daughter of mine." The room gasped. The air vanished from my lungs. In that moment, time slowed, chandeliers blurred, voices faded, and I could hear only the pounding of my own heart. I stepped back, trembling, staring at him, at the man who raised me, fed me, taught me to be strong, only to crush me when I finally stood tall. "So that's it," I whispered. "You'd rather humiliate me than admit what you've done?" He didn't answer. He just turned away, as if I'd never existed. My mother tried to reach for me, but my father's glare froze her in place. Jason avoided my eyes. Grace looked delighted. And I walked out. Alone. Outside, the air was cold. My heels sank into the damp grass as I left the ballroom behind. My vision blurred with tears, but I didn't fall apart. Not yet. I just kept walking, past the lights, the laughter, the lies. When I reached the car, I finally broke. The tears came in waves, raw and violent. I screamed into the night, my voice swallowed by the wind. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was betrayal so deep it felt like death. Hours passed before I could breathe again. I looked up at the mansion glowing in the distance, the house I'd called home, and I realized something that chilled me to the core. No one inside was coming after me. Not my father. Not my brother. Not even my mother. That's when the loneliness hit. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from realizing you were never seen in the first place. But even through the wreckage, something started to rise inside me, a different kind of fire. I remembered Aunt Lillian's words, "He only loves mirrors that reflect him." I wiped my tears. If he couldn't stand my reflection, Maybe it was time he saw his own. That night, I made a silent promise not to win back his love, not to earn respect, but to make sure the truth he buried finally saw the light. He denied me as his daughter that night. But soon, he'd learn what it feels like to be stripped of everything he built on lies. The first thing I did was stop asking for permission to exist. I stopped waiting for my father to remember me and started collecting the things he'd buried: memories, papers, receipts, tiny truths he'd thought were safe in locked drawers. Sadness was still there, like a bruise, but it no longer defined me. It became the map. Aunt Lillian was my first ally. She slid a small envelope across the kitchen table the day after the engagement party, her fingers trembling like she carried an explosion. "I kept these for you," she said. Inside, letters my mother had written and never sent, a faded birth certificate, and a stack of old bank statements with handwriting that matched my father's. Her eyes were steady. "He's been lying for years. You deserve to know. Daniel gave me something else, access." Quiet, careful, loyal Daniel, who still believed the company should be run with honor. He worked late nights pulling account histories and flagged transfers that led to shell companies in places I couldn't pronounce. "These aren't mistakes," he told me, voice low. "Someone moved money to preserve a story, not the company." He taught me to read the ledgers like a language. I learned which columns hid guilt, which signatures sealed deception. I hired Detective Harris through Aunt Lillian, an investigator who didn't care about family names, only facts. He smelled of old coffee and practical patience. He ran forensics on the documents, traced signatures, verified notarizations, and found an astonishing thing: a legal amendment that quietly reassigned my father's assets years ago, the kind of paper that would erase a daughter from a will if you knew how to write it. "He created a paper trail to hide the truth," Harris said bluntly. "And he assumed you'd never look." Looking back felt like crossing a field of broken glass. Each discovery cut, but every cut made me clearer. I found the company memo that disguised payments to Jason as consulting fees and the email thread where Grace suggested a plan to minimize complications. I found a ledger entry with my name crossed out and a new name written beside it, a signature I recognized from a holiday card. The plan had to be surgical. I could yell and collapse the house with one public outburst, but that would be chaos, not justice. I wanted exposure that could not be rewritten. So we built a trap: forensic proof authenticated by Harris, financial audits led by Daniel, and personal letters from my mother and Aunt Lillian that proved motive. We threaded everything into a single narrative that journalists and lawyers couldn't ignore. Every night, I rehearsed the moment of release not as a scream but as testimony. I practiced steady breathing, precise words, the look I would give my father when the room finally stopped pretending. I worried about what I would become if I let bitterness lead. I didn't want to destroy for the sake of destroying. I wanted the truth to be known, respect restored where it belonged, and the lies exposed so no one else would be ruined by them. On the morning of the company anniversary, the night my father would stand under the spotlight and accept praise for a life built on silence, Detective Harris called with the final confirmation. "Everything's certified," he said. "We have signatures, transfers, notarizations. It all ties to him." His tone was flat, but I heard the weight of what it meant. I walked to the mirror and looked at myself. The woman staring back had the same scarred heart, but her jaw was set. I thought of my mother's quiet face, Aunt Lillian's steady hand, Daniel's faith. I thought of the way my father had spoken my name and then taken it away. "Are you ready?" Aunt Lillian asked when she found me packing the folder into my bag. I zipped it closed and felt the papers inside like coiled thunder. "I don't know if I'm ready to hurt him," I admitted. "But I know I'm ready to stop being invisible. Tonight the hall will be full of their smiles and their polished lies. Tonight, everyone who ever pretended not to see me will be there. If I don't do this now, the secret will live on. If I do it, there's no going back." The night of the Marlowe Company's 40th anniversary gala arrived like a storm disguised in silk. The ballroom shimmered again, gold chandeliers, reporters, champagne, every polished surface reflecting the illusion of perfection my father had built his empire upon. But this time, I wasn't there to decorate it. I was there to end it. I walked in quietly, wearing black, not the mourning kind, but the kind that looks like power. My father was already on stage, smiling, shaking hands, his voice echoing through the speakers. For 40 years, this company has stood for integrity, family, and legacy. Those words almost made me laugh. Integrity, family, legacy. He spoke them like a priest delivering a sermon he didn't believe. I stood near the back with Aunt Lillian and Daniel, my hands tight around the folder that had become my weapon: documents, letters, signatures. Proof that the man the world worshipped was a fraud. The applause swelled as my father called Jason forward. And now, I'm proud to announce my son as the future of Marlowe Industries. Cameras flashed. The crowd cheered. Grace kissed Jason's cheek with that same practiced smile, flawless, rehearsed. That's when I stepped forward. The room quieted, not out of respect, but confusion. They weren't used to seeing me speak, let alone interrupt. My heels echoed against the marble as I walked toward the stage. Jason's smile faltered. Grace's hand tightened on his arm. My father's jaw clenched, but he tried to keep his composure. "Elena," he said softly, the microphone still in his hand. "Now isn't the time." I took a deep breath and reached for the second microphone on the stand. "It's exactly the time, Dad." My voice carried, calm but steady. "You always taught me that truth matters, at least when it makes us look good." A few uneasy chuckles from the crowd. My father's eyes hardened. "Elena, please. This is a family celebration." I opened the folder. "Then let's celebrate the whole family, not just the parts you choose to recognize." The first document came out, projected onto the large screen behind us. The audience gasped. "This is a financial report from Marlowe Industries, showing illegal fund transfers under my brother's name, authorized by you." Jason stepped forward. "That's a lie." I turned to him. "No, Jason. It's math. And math doesn't lie." I took out the second file. "And this is a legal amendment. A forged one. The one that quietly removed me from the family trust 10 years ago, using my father's signature twice." Gasps. Murmurs. The sound of cameras clicking. My father's mask cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about," he hissed. I looked at him, really looked at him, the man who taught me that silence was respect, that love was obedience. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. You denied me to protect your reputation. You stole my name to save your empire. But tonight, everyone sees the truth you buried." He slammed his hand against the podium. "Enough." I didn't flinch. I pulled out the last envelope, my mother's letter. "Mom tried to warn me years ago. She knew what you did, but you broke her into silence too. You called her weak. You called me unstable. But all we ever wanted was honesty." Marion, sitting in the front row, covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Aunt Lillian stood, her voice ringing through the hall. "She's telling the truth, Charles. I saw those documents myself." The crowd erupted, whispers, gasps, phones recording every second. My father looked around, trapped, his empire of lies collapsing under its own applause. "You don't understand, Elena. I did this for the family." I stepped closer, my voice barely a whisper but cutting like glass. "You did it for yourself." Jason tried to grab the microphone, shouting, "You're destroying everything." I turned to him and said, "No, Jason. I'm just revealing what you helped build." Security moved closer, unsure whether to stop me or protect me. But it didn't matter anymore, the truth was already out. I faced the audience one last time. 4 years, I was told to stay quiet to protect this family's name. But silence doesn't protect, it poisons. So tonight, I'm reclaiming what you tried to erase: my name, my truth, my dignity. The room fell silent. My father's face had gone pale, Jason stood frozen, Grace's smile finally cracked. I handed the folder to Detective Harris, who stepped from the shadows like a final act of justice. "These documents are already verified. They'll be submitted to the authorities tonight." Gasps again. Journalists scribbled notes. The flash of cameras became blinding. I turned back to my father, my voice breaking but firm. "You once said I was no daughter of yours. Tonight, I'm proving that I never needed to be because I'm more honest than you ever were." He opened his mouth to speak, But the words never came. The applause started slowly, hesitant, unsure, and then grew louder, rippling through the hall like thunder. And as the lights of his empire flickered under the weight of truth, I walked off that stage, calm, steady, free. For the first time in my life, his silence didn't control me. It condemned him. When the last spotlight dimmed and the crowd began to scatter, the silence that followed was almost sacred. The truth had done what years of obedience never could, it had set me free. I stepped outside the ballroom into the cool night air. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing, really breathing. The city lights shimmered against the glass towers, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small beneath them. I felt steady, whole. Inside, I could still hear the chaos unraveling, reporters swarming, my father trying to salvage his image, Jason arguing with Grace, my mother quietly crying behind the curtain. But none of it belonged to me anymore. I had returned every piece of their shame, and now, I was walking away with my dignity intact. Aunt Lillian caught up to me outside. Her eyes were red but proud. "You did what no one else dared," she whispered. I smiled faintly. No. I just stopped being afraid of losing people who were never really mine. We stood in silence for a while. I thought of all the years I'd begged for approval, every moment I'd tried to fit into a picture that had no space for me. That night, the picture shattered, and instead of grief, I felt relief. Later, I drove back to the old house my mother had left me, the one my father once called worthless property. I opened the door, and the scent of cedar and old memories filled the air. I walked through the empty rooms, tracing my fingers over the dustcoat furniture. Every echo reminded me that I had lived my entire life trying to be seen, and now, I no longer needed to be. I sat by the window, watching the sunrise break over the horizon. The first light spilled across the floor like forgiveness. 4 years, I thought revenge would heal me, but what truly healed me was truth. Truth stripped of fear, of shame, of expectation. The next morning, the headlines spread everywhere. Business tycoon exposed by estranged daughter, decades of fraud revealed. I didn't feel joy or triumph. Just peace. Justice had a quiet sound, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. Jason tried to call me once. I didn't answer. Some things don't need closure, only distance. My father's empire was now under investigation, and though part of me ached for what could have been, I knew some losses are necessary. Before I closed the chapter completely, I visited my mother's grave. I placed a white lily on the headstone and whispered, "I finally spoke, Mom." And they finally listened. The wind carried my words away, but I knew she heard. As I walked back to the car, I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. They took away my name, my inheritance, my place at their table, but they could never take away my voice again. Respect isn't given by blood, I whispered to myself. It's earned by truth even when it costs you everything. I started the engine and drove off into the light. No tears, no rage, just quiet certainty. Because when you rise after being denied, you don't return for revenge, you return for dignity. And that is the one thing no one can take away. Moral reflection. When respect is denied by others, it must be rebuilt within yourself. Family may betray, but truth restores what pride destroys. In the end, silence protects no one, but dignity, once reclaimed, protects forever. Originality check. The story centers on a father-daughter corporate betrayal, not a romantic or marital revenge, a rare focus in family revenge dramas. The revenge is intellectual and emotional, not physical, driven by evidence, truth, and exposure. The climax and resolution emphasize justice through truth, offering a reflective closure instead of vengeance.